Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite series of this year. At this point in time, my two favorite series of 2023 are the topic of this video, I'm a Virgo, and Swarm. Both series are streaming originals distributed by Prime Video. Both have incredibly charismatic lead performers, Jharrel Jerome and Dominique Fishback. They also both have shorter run times. Swarm is a half-hour series, and I'm a Virgo also mostly averages out to be close to half an hour. Episode 1 is the longest episode, sitting at a runtime of 37 minutes, and episode 4 is the shortest episode with a runtime of just under 22 minutes. Both series also have narratives that are deeply in touch with topical socio-political issues. I never made a video dedicated to Swarm, but if you haven't watched it, I do highly recommend it. I know the feedback for the show's ending is a bit mixed, but to be frank, Dominique Fishback is so incredible to watch that she just carries the whole thing. Swarm, without getting into anything too specific, initially comes across like a satirical comedic horror series about stan culture, but in actuality, it's examining much more serious issues such as grief, loss, and inequality. As for I'm a Virgo, it's a Boots Riley show, so you already know he's going to call out capitalism with a giant megaphone. But let's rewind a bit and introduce the premise.
I'm a Sagittarius.
Yes.
All right? Watch out.
Created by visionary filmmaker Boots Riley, who also wrote and directed the feature film Sorry to Bother You, I'm a Virgo is a darkly comedic, fantastical coming-of-age joyride about Cootie, played by Jharrel Jerome, a 13-foot-tall young black man in Oakland, California. Having grown up hidden away, passing time on a diet of comic books and TV shows, he escapes to experience the beauty and contradictions of the real world. Similar to Sorry to Bother You, Boots Riley chose to film in Oakland, the city where he grew up in, and also, once again, play with surrealism in his storytelling. And everything about this series feels fresh, innovative, imaginative, and of course, revolutionary in every sense of that word. I love that the show was filmed and set in Oakland because it feels more distinct in its identity compared to other Hollywood projects. Even the music choices are a reflection of this. Listen, as soon as I heard E40 playing in the background, I knew they were staying true to the Bay Area. Now, let's talk characters. We have our protagonist, Cootie, played by Jharrel Jerome, and I cannot praise Jharrel enough for his work in bringing this character to life. Right from episode 1, I found myself so emotionally invested in this character because Jharrel plays him with this wide-eyed naivety, this kind-hearted goodness, and because it's Boots Riley, and you know he has some things to say and some things to call out, you get this sense of dread about what exactly this character is going to experience and learn about the world once he forays out for the first time. Because Cootie was born already as a giant, this is where you have to suspend your sense of disbelief for the sake of fiction, because when you see how big he is as a baby, there is just no way an average-sized woman could physically carry, let alone give birth to a baby this size. Having grown up as a giant, as someone who will become 13 feet tall when he's finished growing, that's almost 4 meters tall for those of you who understand height in metric, his aunt and uncle, Martise and LaFrancine, have raised him hidden away inside for his entire life for his own safety. Before and after he eventually starts to go out into the world, one of the things that really stands out about how the visual world building is constructed for this series is how much work has been put into doing this concept practically. This is not just another example of digitally splicing people who are playing regular-sized characters and Cootie together in post. Boots Riley was adamant about doing things practically when he was pitching the series and when it actually came time to do it. From the outset, Riley had a clear vision of how he wanted I'm a Virgo to be made and to look. I knew that I never wanted to be in the process of just filming actors in a sea of green, he says. That's not what made me excited about making films, and I don't like the way it ends up looking. So, part of the pitch was always the way that we're going to film this, and that had to do with the practical aspects of it. COVID presented a unique opportunity for Riley to relay his vision when pitching to Amazon Studios. Tim Partridge, CEO of 3210 Studios, and his team created models that Riley could use to show how using forced perspective would make the series more visually realistic. We took an off-the-shelf 24th scale car, put some character models in that, and then took a 48th scale car, so it's half the size, chopped it in half, and put it closer to the camera with the same size model. But because that same size model was closer to the camera, he looked a lot bigger, Partridge explains. Riley was then able to take this little model, put it on somebody's desk, and say, this is how we'll shoot this and make the guy look 13 feet tall without using CGI. That's That's exactly what Riley did in 2020, except from behind a desk on Zoom as a result of the pandemic. Boots demonstrated forced perspective on Zoom with an iPhone lens and 2 cameras, so we had this captive audience of executives at Amazon Studios and elsewhere sitting on their screen, and they saw it happen in front of them, explains Ellenberg. By the way, all of the interview quotes I will be pulling for this video are from the show's official press packet, and that packet clearly states that all of these interviews were conducted before the writer's strike. I fully support the writer's strike, and if SAG ends up moving forward with the strike, I will also be supporting that. I have a bunch of post-it notes in my room with video topics I've been wanting to get to for quite some time now, so I am by no means running low on ideas if the industry needs to go on hiatus for whatever duration in order for workers to get their fair share of the profits their labor creates. Now back to I'm a Virgo. Another lead character is Flora, a fast food worker who is Cooty's love interest, though to be clear, her character is not presented as just a love interest. You get to learn a lot about her, and one of the interesting things about her is that she's also different. Cooty is 13 feet tall, and Flora is really fast. When they first showed her, I didn't actually realize that she had what amounts to a superpower. I thought that we were just playing with surrealism and that what we were seeing was some hyper-stylized presentation of her that was communicating something about either Cooty's feelings for her or something about the world that this story is taking place in. In actuality, she does in fact have a superhuman ability, and the way that this is explored is really interesting, not only in the sense of an origin story, as is often customary for characters with superpowers, but also how it impacts her in the present day and how she connects to other people. And there's something really emotionally moving about how these aspects of Cooty and Flora make them feel alone or separate from others, and in turn can potentially be a means of bringing them together. On a more lighthearted note, though, without being overly graphic or spoiling the details, when these two eventually take their relationship to the next level, I could not believe what I was watching. For everyone who has ever complained that too many of the newer superhero stories of mega franchises are devoid of that type of passion, just wait until you see what Boots Riley, Jharrel Jerome, and actress Olivia Washington put together, because I have never seen in my life anything like it. I really need to emphasize again just how impressive the work of the crew is on this series. Once the question of how they were going to bring this series to life was answered, the producing team then had to figure out who could do it. This type of work hasn't been done for so long that there is a generational gap between people who know how to do this and who've done it before, and people who are currently working in the industry, says Associate VFX Supervisor Scott Kervin, who notes the 1970s were the last time many of the techniques used to create scenes in I'm a Virgo were prominent in filmmaking. SPFX coordinator John McLeod echoes that sentiment, remarking that his team's work was a mixture of a lot of older gags that I had done over the years, he says. You think back, oh, I remember I did something like this on a show 15, 20 years ago, and then bring that skill forward and mix it in with the new gag that you have in front of you. There was also a team that had to make a giant 13-foot-tall puppet version of Cooty to use for filming certain parts with the regular-sized characters, and there was also an animation team who had to put together this animated series that appears periodically throughout I'm a Virgo. Ultimately, what we as the audience are treated to is an amalgamation of excellent craftsmanship from people who are highly skilled across all these different departments of the filmmaking process. There are also some characters who are Cooty's new friends, his first friends, and his only friends. Of the different members of that group, I would probably say that Jones is my favorite. She is an activist. She deeply cares about trying to improve the lives of those who are suffering under systemic injustice. Of course I'm going to love her. I don't think we actually get to see a lot of compelling activist characters in Hollywood fiction because, to be quite frank, I don't think a lot of the people who get the opportunity to write fiction and get it adapted for film or television have the knowledge or perspective to be able to do that concept justice in a fictional narrative. But Boots Riley, if you know anything about this man, it should come as no surprise that he would be able to execute the creation of an activist character at such an immaculate standard. Another notable character in this story is one portrayed by Walton Goggins, and there really is no way for me to talk about this character without getting into the final main section of this video, which is the commentary. One of the things I found most revelatory about watching this series for the first time was that it was a giant call out of a lot of mainstream superhero entertainment media, and in a broader sense, propaganda in Hollywood. This character that is often referred to as the hero, he is in many ways bearing resemblance to superheroes that we have seen increasingly popularized over the last decade or so in superhero films, and eventually also branching out more extensively into television series as well. Of course, these films and series have been around for much longer than that. You can go back several decades and find both films and series starring popular superhero characters, but there's just no denying that the corporatization and capitalizing on these IPs have hit a whole other level over the last decade or so. And I personally have hit a point of growing tired of a lot of those stories. I don't watch as many of those films as I used to, and I also don't enjoy many of those films to the degree that I used to because of my own personal journey of learning more things about the ways that the military-industrial complex and the prison-industrial complex, all of these nefarious forces, are fed back to us, the movie-going, TV-viewing masses, through our supposedly just for fun entertainment fiction. Things that we want to enjoy as a means of escapism, right? You'd like to think, well, it's just a bit of harmless fun. But it's not. And that's what was so refreshing about watching I'm a Virgo. This show does not speak cryptically. It is very direct in confronting how deeply insidious propaganda is. This hero character, he says something on the show about how it's his job to put out righteous propaganda predicated on the rule of law. That was one of many times while I was watching this show that made me want to scream and hoot and holler because I was just so exhilarated by having a story that was compelling and entertaining without pushing me into some sort of moral conundrum where I have to ponder whether or not it's ethical for me to have purchased a ticket to see it or whether it's irresponsible for me to publicize it because of anti-revolutionary rhetoric that has been woven into the narrative. There is a different superhero story being celebrated at this very moment that I'm making this review, where the narrative of that story draws a direct correlation between cops and the actions of a superhero, and its intention is clearly presented as if both of those things are the morally upstanding, heroic position. I'm sorry, what? When politicians right as we speak are defying the will of the people to create a cop city and activists who speak out against it are being arrested and imprisoned, you want me to hop on the bandwagon and unquestioningly praise a story with an emotional crux of cops needing to be saved? No, thank you. I didn't order this. Please send it back to the kitchen. I think that in recent years, The Boys has been the most celebrated anti-superhero story for all the ways that the material is subversive, but I'm a Virgo is so far beyond that. The Boys has been on for long enough now that even though I still love that show, I can also still see the cracks in the veneer. I don't want to go too much into that. I have reviewed The Boys over the years. You can watch those videos if you want more in-depth thoughts, and I might actually circle back to that series at some point, but I have not really decided fully on that yet. On the most intimate level, I'm a Virgo does use the concept of cootie being a giant as an allegory for the way it feels to be othered as a Black person in America, but it's also a means of amplifying things because the show is not actually shying away from the topic of anti-Blackness. This is not a parallel universe where anti-Blackness is removed and its only type of bigotry that's existing is anti-giant bigotry. It's both. Boots Riley explained it like this. I think at first I thought about the big contradictions and conflicts that would come from a 13-foot tall Black man in the world that we live in. Through thinking about the different conflicts that would be heightened by that happening, it led me to having it become a tale mainly set in this time when Black folks are not allowed to be a kid anymore, but also not treated as adults, which ends up being a long period of time for young folks of color. By making him that big, it blew up all the other questions that come around the idea of race and identity. One of those considerations, Riley explains, is the idea that because of his physical attributes, as we're talking about Cootie as a character, there's no way we can get past that and only talk about what's inside him. And similarly with race in the world that we live in, no matter what a person feels about themselves, the world treats them a certain way based on the way they look. And it's the definition of what we're talking about when we say that the idea of race is a societal construct. The commentary about entertainment media being a tool to spread propaganda doesn't come in fully until later in the series, which I find to be an effective means of pacing the story. You start off with the more intimate, naive portrait of Cootie, where he hasn't really experienced the world yet. He only knows what he's read in comics and seen on television, but eventually the scope of the story and the world expands, as does the range of socio-political commentary. I never thought that I would get to see a new story that is anywhere near the concept of superheroes with such revolutionary ideology sewn into the fabric. In episode 1, I kid you not, a character says a line that's something along the lines of, "Everybody's on an FBI list anyways, might as well be for a good reason." When Boots Riley is saying the quiet part out loud, I will be seated with my hair tucked behind my ears so that I can catch every word. Overall, like I said before, I'm a Virgo is my favorite new series I have seen all year. It is multifaceted in its strengths, be it having an endearing new character to give your heart to, a love story, a story of family, a story of friendship, a new addition to genre storytelling with this cocktail of surrealism, satire, and superheroes, but also I love to see a righteous call-out. My favorite films of 2021 were House of Gucci, which is a scathing indictment of the ultra-wealthy, and The Last Duel, which is a powerful statement about systemic violent misogyny. My favorite films of 2022 were Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, which was an anti-capitalist story. Any story that shows greed being prioritized over the well-being of humanity, animals, the environment, or all of the above is an anti-capitalist story. And of course, Avatar: The Way of Water, which is the most epic anti-imperialist blockbuster we've seen since the first Avatar film. And now we have I'm a Virgo, which is satisfying that same hunger I have in what I consider to be compelling storytelling. I'm a Virgo is a righteous call out of capitalism, and it does so without being didactic. I am thoroughly entertained and emotionally moved from start to finish. And if it weren't for the fact that there is a writer's strike going on right now, I would be banging down all of the virtual email doors, begging to speak with Boots Riley because there are so many questions to ask about this series. The final thing I will leave you with, just in case you are still here and are finding yourself wondering, I will share a tidbit Boots Riley shared about why the series is called I'm a Virgo. I was thinking, what are real ways that people classify themselves that are subjective, yet really tell you something about how they think about the world? Zodiac signs are one of them, and maybe one of the most trivial things. In the midst of all this craziness, what Cootie thinks is important is that he's a Virgo, and for everybody else, that's the last thing they think about. As for choosing the Earth sign specifically, Boots says, I just happen to know a lot of Virgos, and out of all the people that I know that are extra proud about their sign, that's one that rang true. Make sure that you all tune in to I'm a Virgo, which will be available on Prime Video on June 23rd. Thank you all for watching my video about the show. If you are here after the series has already been released, that means that I will be allowed to talk about spoilers, so share your opinions in the comments so we can talk about it, because right now when I'm recording and publishing this review, I have to abide by not too long, but it is a pretty precise list of do not reveals, so I have to keep those details to myself. Like and comment to help this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!